A very warm welcome to you all for Global Accessibility Awareness Day with Academic and Research Libraries Group Scotland. My name is Kirsten, I'm Membership Officer for SILIP Scotland, and let me start by saying a massive thank you to the ARLG Committee for organising such a timely and thought-provoking afternoon for us, as well as all of you for coming along, of course. We've got a lot to get through in the best possible way, so I'm going to whiz through our Zoom housekeeping now, give you a quick sense of our timings, and then pass over to our inspiring keynote speaker to start off today's learning. Now, I'm very aware that our online accessibility skills are going to be enhanced by the end of this afternoon, but for now, I'll just point out that captions are enabled. You should see them running along the bottom of your screen, and these can be enabled or disabled according to your requirements by clicking the button in your Zoom tools bar. If you're having any difficulties, please don't hesitate to post a message in the chat, either to me or the group. You're welcome to have your cameras on or off, but please keep your mics muted until we come to the collaborative, interactive elements of today. So I'll quickly outline our plan. We're about to welcome the wonderful Kellie for her keynote. Then we're all staying together for a workshop with Adam from AbilityNet. And then at 2:05, there will be a 10-minute break. Then from 2:15, we divide into two smaller groups so that everyone can enjoy workshops with Ros Walker and Huw Alexander. Can hardly wait. And with that, we are on to welcoming our keynote speaker, Kellie Mote from JISC. Kellie's goal is to ensure that assistive technology is effectively deployed and forms an essential component of an inclusive educational experience. Her other interests and experience include a deep understanding of accessibility regulations and inclusive strategies. She's passionate about connecting people and finding innovative solutions that work in the real world. And she facilitates and develops supportive communities of practice for members who are interested in assistive technology and accessibility. So Kellie, thank you so much for joining us today. Whenever you're ready, the virtual floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Gosh, I don't know if I can follow that introduction. Hopefully I can live up to that. Okie dokes, I'll just get the old slides up. Okay, can give me a shout that you can see those slides.
Looks great to me. Yeah.
Yay. Okay, thanks very much. So yeah, I've yeah, as Ros pointed out earlier, I'm taking the buttering up approach here. But no, not really. It's really, this is what came. I've done a few things with librarians, and this is the instinctive title that came to mind, because I think you are the unsung superheroes of accessibility, and I'm going to explain sort of why that is and how we can add to our superpowers and empower your organizations further. So yeah, I'm Kellie. I work at JISC. Anybody that's not engaged with JISC is a member organization, and you're all members. Everyone who works in a college or university in the UK, with a very small number of exemptions, is automatically a member of JISC, and JISC provides support with all things digital, loads of stuff. If you work in the library world, you probably will have engaged with JISC in terms of our collections and licensing agreements and things like that. But we do lots of other things as well, and one of them is running communities, as was just mentioned there. And we've got a community here, and also providing advice and guidance around all sorts of stuff, including the legal bit as well, as was mentioned, because that's obviously super important as well. So why do superheroes come to mind when I think of librarians? I mean, even just reflecting on the last few years that I've been working at JISC, and I came into JISC as accessibility regulations were coming in. I've always been struck by how often librarians get it. They understand what this is about, what the point is, and are very engaged in our communities and in the life of their college or university in helping them forward to meet regulations. But also it's really about aligning with the values that librarians have anyway. I think you never meet a librarian who doesn't want to provide unlimited access to important information, to support your users, what do we call them? Library users, students, students would be important with it, but also staff as well, to support people, recognizing that people access information differently, and will have different requirements. Often it's the first time perhaps that a student either realizes that they're having difficulty maybe engaging with some content, in particular at university level, or that there are such things as assistive technology or alternative formats is in a library context. So I think there's a real kind of, I think it taps into that core value about just like fairness, equality of access. So I think you never really have to get buy-in, I would say, from librarians around accessibility. There's never any sort of pushback around, oh, that's just too difficult to do, and that's, oh, can we not just kind of have a workaround? You just, librarians get it and they understand why it's important. And then it's not just about learning, there's also a link with well-being and student mental health as well. Accessing resources, studying, preparing for exams can be really stressful. What we don't want to do is introduce further barriers to students, and whether they're writing an essay or they're trying to decide around sources for a research project. It's all about treating our students with dignity and respect, making them feel like they belong, that the library is a place for them where they will get information and support that they need. And I think it's useful here as well to just reflect on what the impact of doing these things are. Because sometimes the thing with accessibility, if it's all working smoothly, then you shouldn't really see the impact necessarily day to day. When things go wrong, that things tend to sort of blow up or whatever. But when things go well, it just means everyone can do what they need to do. And I've got a couple of quotes here. There was a really good thread on Twitter, and I'll post it in the chat actually. I think there was going to be a blog post come out of this. And what it started off with was a student saying, what does accessibility mean? And she just wanted responses from people who were disabled and who benefited from accessible digital content. And so just in case it's a bit small or whatever, folks can't see that, I'll just read it out just now. The first one is, for me, accessibility means having equal access to opportunities, activities, and information. That's what we're all about. Accessibility makes me feel included and not a burden. Accessibility makes me feel valued. Accessibility makes situations less stressful. It means I can do things more efficiently. So you can see there, even for that comment, the really strong themes as well, linking us back to well-being and mental health and stress as well. So it's transformative, this kind of work. It's has huge impact on people's lives. And the second one is, again, a really good point. Accessibility means a burden off my shoulders for a little while. Most of the time I have to advocate for myself and fight for access, and this is exhausting. Constantly explaining your disability and justifying your needs is exhausting. Accessibility lets me take a break. So, there's lots of reasons to be accessible, but I would say that's our number one, is that it just makes people's lives better, improves the student experience as well. But there's lots of other benefits as well. Another way in which you're superheroes is in making those connections as well. So doing things like, noticing that maybe a student would benefit from an assistive technology and directing them to that. Most libraries do have some form of assistive technology available, and realizing that there needs to be, that students have experiencing barriers and they maybe need an alternative format or whatever. And also being a useful resource to colleagues as well, whether it's teaching staff. Again, I don't need to tell you this, you know all this, but this is from our perspective at JISC. You're huge supports, and not just academically, but also when we get into this, really important stuff around all the legal compliance. You know, we're talking about important things like Equality Act and accessibility regulations. You may find that, you know, people are looking to you for support and knowledge and collaborative working as well. Accessibility is a cross-organizational challenge. So when at JISC, when we work with colleges or universities on building a roadmap to accessibility, it always requires a workshop and a steering group with people from across the organization as well, to provide input, and librarians are key to that as well. I'm just going to take a pause and just check the chat. Oh, thanks very much for posting that, that link in, just in case anyone was saying, we can't hear you, Kelly, but it looks like you can. So that's great, thanks. Okay, so yeah, putting your accessibility knowledge to good use in helping your college or university to prepare for diverse learners. If there's one thing we can be sure of, is that any group of humans is going to include people who are diverse. There's going always, any group, there's going to be people who have a disability, who have an additional learning need, or who just like to do things in their own way. And again, that's where librarians can assist in that anticipatory requirement for organizations by ensuring your content is accessible, that you're bringing in, and that the systems you're using are usable by everybody. You're helping to really build that capacity within your organization. So I've touched a little bit on this, and it would be remiss of me not to mention that there is a legal aspect of this. Obviously, there's an ethical and a business case for accessibility, but something that's focused the mind more than anything else over the last few years has been the introduction of public sector bodies, website and mobile applications accessibility regulations 2018, which is like just like burned into my brain because I have to talk about it so much. What this has done is that it has, I would say it's, I mean, just, you know, the evidence speaks for itself. It's really raised the profile of accessibility, and it is no longer something that is kind of handled by people who are passionate about it, people who are already converted. It's the legislation gets buy-in from people who previously maybe didn't know that much about it or don't really think it was that big a deal, because it adds an element of risk, in the same way that GDPR caused an explosion in our understanding of data protection and the way that we approach it. The public sector accessibility regulations, it does work. I mean, it's, you know, there's often a bit of a sort of ethical thing of like, oh, it should just be the way that we are all, and it's like, yeah, it should, but I've worked in this area for like over 20 years and nothing has got accessibility under the noses of the people who have authority to do things like the regulations have, because there's a risk involved. And so it's added to a risk register in an organization because there's a risk of non-compliance. Suddenly it starts to get a strategy and it starts to get resources. You know, it's kind of, it does have an impact. And it's not easy. The thing with colleges and universities is that their digital estates are more complex than other public sector bodies. Universities in particular have absolutely massive digital estates. So this isn't easy. It's not a one and done. It's a constant journey, and it'll never be done. A bit like I don't know if this is getting an out of date reference when I say the painting of the Fourth Rail Bridge, because I don't know if they do have to keep painting it anymore. The paint got better. It's like when they finished, they just had to always go back to the start again. As new content comes out, as new ways of delivery, for instance, you know, immersive technologies is a big thing that's coming out now. And it's like, well, what are the accessibility considerations of that? More open access materials as well. At JISC, we're working on Octopus, which some of you might have heard of. It's a new open access platform for research. And I'm so pleased to say as well that at JISC, the people who are working on that and the kind of development teams, they are completely on board with accessibility and they're building it in from the start. I know that things like research repositories and things like that, in the past, they can be quite difficult to police, and everything's in PDF and things. And so it's great to see that my colleagues in JISC are ensuring that things like Octopus will be accessible from the start. On the topic of PDF as well, I'm aware that Adobe themselves are kind of stepping up and are trialing a new product at the moment for remediating PDFs in enormous bulk. And again, you know, we're hoping to test that, and some universities are testing out as well before it goes to market. So there's lots of things happening, and these are all happening sort of because of these regulations. They've pushed a lot of these things along, the awareness, and it means we now get time when the people at JISC say in Octopus, we want to make this accessible. It's like, well, yeah, we'll ensure that that's built into the plan. So I'm aware I've been sort of harping on a lot about accessibility with an assumption that everybody knows what it means, but I thought just in case anybody's kind of like new to the field, and that's why you've come along today, because you want to learn and understand. And I know that you're going to do a much deeper dive with the other guest facilitators today. I'm just doing the kind of big blah at the start to get us all in the zone and in the mood, but you're going to do a much deeper dive. So I'm going to do just a really quick, what are we even talking about here? What does this mean? So the regulations, what they primarily draw upon is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA. Now, what does all that mean? Now, if you look these up, you'll see it's this like great big long list of success criteria for accessibility. Not perfect, not always 100% easy to understand, but mostly as well directed at people who are developers. I would say people who work in user experience or people who are designers. So for us guys, we don't really actually always have to understand what all these things mean. We just need to know that it's a kind of quality standard. So when we're sourcing things or we're, you know, looking at procuring new products or whatever, we need to be looking out for this and say to folks, like, to what extent are you complying with these? So what do they mean? Like, what does it even mean? So it's based on if we say 4 core principles, which are perceivable. And that means that everyone can access and understand visual and audio content. So for instance, if someone is visually impaired, they can successfully magnify that content, and they can also listen to it as well using a screen reader, or if they're using a dynamic braille display, which is a kind of device that has like little plastic pins that pop up and it works with a screen reader, they can access the content that way as well. Understandable is in there as well. So I realize like at an academic level, that can be sometimes a tricky one when we talk about understandable language, but it's really like it's language that's appropriate and that is not unnecessarily confusing. And so that would be in things like on your websites, especially if you're given instructions to students about things they have to do, having it in as plain language as possible. That helps people who have any kind of language processing difficulty. It's also great and enormously appreciated by students who are speakers of other languages and who are maybe, you know, come along to learn English or whatever. We don't want to make things more difficult for people. Just going to pause a bit. Oh, we've got some little comments in there, which I can come back to. Oh, some good ones there. What I'll do, I've just got a couple more slides and then I'll have a look in the chat, because I know we're due to go to 1:35, I think. So I'll just round this bit up and then I'll look at your chat questions. Okay. So another impact of accessibility is if content or a system, so it's not just your content, it's not just your PDFs or your ebooks or whatever, it's also things like your system, like your library system for actually finding stuff. things, anything that students have to use, basically anything accessed through a browser, with a few exemptions. Exemptions could be like archive content that's no longer used very frequently, stuff like that, or things you've not paid for. That comes in as well, but virtually everything accessed through a browser. That's why I'm saying it's quite a big challenge for us. If a student can't use a mouse or a keyboard, either some of the time or all of the time, if content is accessible, then they're still able to control it and to engage with it as well, perhaps by using speech or some kind of alternative device as well, but especially speech recognition as well, they can use to control it. But a huge benefit as well, and something that really came to light during the early days of the pandemic, was the sheer amount of students who did not have laptops. You know, there's this huge assumption that, you know, I think a lot of folks think, oh, everyone's got a laptop, but loads of people, their primary device was a phone. Now, if content is accessible, sort of general rule of thumb, it will display pretty well on a phone. That's often how you can tell if something's inaccessible and rubbish. It looks terrible on a phone. So when you go to a restaurant now and you have to get the QR code for the menu, and you're like, oh no, it's all gone tiny and we can't see it, like that tells you it's inaccessible. If it's accessible, it reflows nicely and you can make it bigger and smaller and you don't lose things. So it just means it's easier to use and people aren't left out if they're using a phone or different browsers or whatever. So actually, I'm going to just touch on one of the questions, I think, from, okay. Oh, a good question from Joy. I just mentioned COVID, so I'm going to mention that. And Jill, okay, what's the most common accessibility issue? Okay, so you touched upon there, you know, what is it? Is it request for alternative formats? Generally, the sort of point with accessibility is it should reduce the need for alternative formats because things are accessible out the box. You will still have some folks that may require them for whatever reason, but generally if something's accessible, then it should be, people can use their assistive technology or inbuilt tools to access it. So I would say alternative formats haven't been a big topic. I would say captioning on video is one of the huge biggies that came in. That was the sort of penultimate kind of milestone in the rollout of the legislation, was in September 2020, and that was the need for captioning. Now, up until about a few weeks before the deadline came in, there was kind of a presumption that automated captioning would be okay, and then it was clarified that that was not the case, and that to be legally compliant, captions had to be checked and corrected. And when you consider, just again to touch on Joy's comment around what about the pandemic, this was in the context of thousands of hours of video being put out sometimes like per day in an institution. So that was a huge challenge for folks. So what we were doing, helping folks with around that is, you know, we've got to be realistic about what is achievable. And so taking a prioritization approach to captioning was what we recommended, and looking at, for instance, courses where you knew that there was deaf or hard of hearing students, or content that was going to go on the main website and was for everybody. And that's something that is evolving again in reaction to this need, this legal need. The technology is evolving and is getting better, and there's services that are coming out as well to help people with this. We had a recent event, our Assistive Technology Network had a DigiFest Fringe, where we had people who were, and we had an engineer from Cambridge who builds speech recognition engines, and we had other folks who work on speech recognition, artificial intelligence. And I would say, you're recording this, you can come back to this in a couple of years and see, was Kelly talking rubbish or not? The general vibe from people who make these things is that the automated stuff is going to get way, way better. It's already come a long way. There's a lot of work being done on recognizing subject-specific language and different accents and things like this. It's machine learning, so the more that goes in, the better it can get. There's a general feeling that it will probably get to a much higher level of accuracy, which will remove a lot of this pain. In the meantime, what we've got to do is find a workaround, and it could be that prioritization. It could be buying in a service where people correct your captions for you, and JISC has just negotiated a discounted license for that using our chest service. I can pop that in the chat afterwards as well if anybody wants to look at that. And then there's companies as well. There's one called CaptionEd, which provides a kind of student-controlled captioning tool. So there's the technology, this industry is responding to our needs. So some good questions there. So what should we be looking for as well is we've got to look for stuff that people making an effort. One of the big, again, to go back to Jill's question, what's the biggest issue? I would say after captioning, it's what to do about third-party content. And this is something that is going to hit you guys more than anybody else, I would say. The legal deal with third-party content is that if you pay for something, if your organization pays for something and it's inaccessible, you or your organization has just assumed the legal risk for that product. What seemed to be happening there is that you're funding an inaccessible product. It seems unfair because you didn't create that content and you don't have control over it, but that is the way that the law is. It's based on a European directive that came in, but then was turned into, it matches very closely. It was absorbed into UK law in the withdrawal agreement for Brexit, but it is almost identical to the European one. So that means suppliers might say to you, we don't have to be accessible, though we're not a public sector body, but you are. So what do we do about this? Well, you can have a look on textBOX. Huw is going to be doing a session with you later. So he is, talk about librarians as superheroes. He's like the meta superhero of all of this. He can really help you out with that. He's got loads of resources. He'll be talking, I'm sure, about Aspire as well. But what we as a community and a sector need to do with suppliers is to push back and to say to them, okay, it might not be a legal requirement for you, but it's a legal requirement for us. So what are you going to do about this? And so best time to do this is when you're actually procuring stuff or when you're renewing licenses, because that's when you've got a bit more consumer control. But we have to keep pushing back. I would say publishing is doing pretty well at this. I've seen an explosion of jobs in the publishing arena for people who work in accessibility. And ask them straight up, where's your accessibility information? Do you comply? Here's the thing, even if you don't know all the ins and outs of WCAG 2.1 AA, they don't know that you don't know. So if you're asking them, where is it? There's a thing called a VPAT, which is voluntary product accessibility template. Just say, where's your VPAT? And like start putting some pressure on them to sort it out. You've got a lot of pressures on you guys. So let's send some back to the people that we give our hard-earned to. I'm just looking at the chat again. Okay, gosh, there's loads happening here. Oh, there's a mention about, yeah, copyright there. Sometimes there can be a conflict. I won't get into that between accessibility and copyright. That's my colleague John Kelly, he's our legal subject specialist, knows all about that. So yeah, actually, if any of you are interested in doing a deeper dive on copyright, yeah, John is your man. Let's see, just doing a quick. Yeah, I think some people responding to that question about common problems. Yeah, documents, web content without headings, an easy one to fix. Yeah, as Jill's saying, it can be quite excruciating to see what happens with speech recognition. Okay. Okay, some really good contributions there, and I'm aware I've just got a few minutes to go. So one thing I would encourage you, oops, I didn't move on, encourage you all to do is you've got a great community here, fantastic. We've also got we've got our JISC communities as well. If you would like to join there, we do free. I'm just going to pop the link in the chat. You're all more than welcome to join. We're sort of multi-platform, to quote our community engagement manager. Communities are about people, not platforms. So we've got lots of different platforms. We have monthly accessibility drop-in clinics, and the next one's going to be about one of the most complex areas of accessibility, which is about maths, and it's always on the first Wednesday of every month. So it'll be the 1st of June at 12:30, and there'll be a link to the clinics from that website. And we've got some great members of our accessibility community themselves talking about co-created resources. I think that could be actually really useful to the folks who've participated today. We've got a massive Teams group. It's got over 1,200 people in it, talking about all sorts of things. We've got a mailing list as well, and we're hoping to start having meetups as well now that we can do that. And as we move into a more mature phase, we're looking at other things that can be done, whether it's like buddy systems, collaborative work, sort of co-creating more resources, a bit like the maths ones we'll see. So lots happening there. So we've got 2 minutes. If you've got any final questions, I can chuck them in the chat. I can stay on for a little bit and answer things in the chat as well if you need to. But if anybody needs to get in touch directly, there's my email address. And you'll find loads of stuff online as well. So I'm just going to stop sharing and just have a little look at the chat. Oh, you're very welcome, Paul. There we go. Did it with 2 minutes to go.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. I think that really, that walk the walk, that was an accessible tour through accessibility. And I think for especially somebody like me who's a novice in this area, I know we're all at different levels of experience, but that was just so enriching. I feel like my knowledge is so much deeper. So thank you. And thanks to everyone for interacting in the chat. It's been great to see everyone sharing their one autocorrect that comes to mind. I think we did a school libraries one, and it was always ask permission from Peanuts before you share the children's work.
I know, yeah. Well, you got to think about it, Belle, you'll have fun when you do this for the captions for this, because JISC, it just never really gets JISC because it's such a weird, word and name. So yeah, there's always going to be tricky ones. But whoops, got an ambulance going past. No, it's a fire engine. So yeah, you get some sort of funny. I quite like Jill's. Was it Jill? You get freezer bra. Oh dear. Oh well, it's all good fun, but it's getting better all the time.
That's what we like to hear. So if anyone has a last minute question for Kelly, please do pop it in the chat, or even just raise your hand. And you're okay to stay around for a little bit longer? Yeah,
I can stay on for a bit just in case anybody wants any links or anything. I was going to pop in a link about some captioning stuff as well, because that's a hot topic. So I'll pop in a couple links with guides about prioritizing and also the kind of techie things that people can have a look at as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kelly. We really
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
No, I love just talking my head off for half an hour. I'm quite happy
we love
to
you
do
talking
that.
your head off at us. That was ideal. We've all learned so much. They were all just, I think the chat is just filling with thanks. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
And I suppose we've got so much. Shall we move on to the total delight, which is our next speaker and workshop leader, AbilityNet innovation consultant Adam Tweed. So AbilityNet is a pioneering UK charity with a global perspective, who believe that the power of digital technology should be available to everyone, regardless of ability and age. And I hope we're all standing behind you on that. Their free online resources and a network of over 300 community-based volunteers help individuals with any disability of any age to use all kinds of digital technology. And their teams of experts help organisations of all types and sizes to become more inclusive and to build accessible digital products and services. AbilityNet are founder members of the global accessibility profession, working closely with some of the biggest businesses on the planet, and they organise TechShare Pro, Europe's largest accessibility gathering. Adam, thank you so much for being with us today. Whenever you're ready, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirsten. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. And can you just give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen, my slide? Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me today. As you said, I'm the innovation consultant at AbilityNet, Adam Tweed, and I want to talk to you about assistive technology, specifically the assistive technology available to you right now, the assistive technology you might not even consider to be assistive technology. But first off, I would like to start with a question. Has anybody heard of Ralph Titor? One for the chat. Any ideas? It's kind of good, because if anybody had, then that would be about 2 minutes of my talk that I wouldn't be able to talk out. So Ralph Titor, he was a mechanical engineer and a prolific inventor. He had what people described as an incredible ability to visualize things in his mind. Titor was also blind, having lost his sight in early childhood. Now, during World War II in the US, the speed limit was set at 35 miles an hour. So bear with me on this. This was in order to save tire wear and limit petrol consumption. Now, the story goes that Titor, being somewhat well-heeled, was being driven about by his lawyer. His lawyer was somewhat heavy-footed and kept speeding up and then braking as soon as he hit the 35 mile an hour speed limit. Titor, being blind, was particularly sensitive to this motion and would regularly end up getting travel sick. So he set his mind to coming up with a solution to control the speed of the car, and the speederstat was born. Okay, so the name didn't stick, but I'm sure most of you will have heard of cruise control. There are loads of examples of assistive tech finding their way into mainstream use, but I particularly like Titor's story as there's no inspirational disabled person. Here, it's just a good inventor who happened to be blind, solving a problem he had. Anyway, as I say, cruise control is an assistive technology. It was born as a result of addressing a difficulty faced as a direct result of a disability. But although it presented a specific barrier to someone with a disability, it's an assistive technology that everybody can benefit from. And this is where we move into the notion of solve for one and extend to many. So what is assistive technology? So I've taken this from gov.uk. The phrase assistive technology is often used to describe products or systems that support and assist individuals with disabilities, restricted mobility, or other impairments to perform functions that might otherwise be difficult or impossible. And I think the phrase "or other impairments" is really important, as it moves us away from a phrase many of us have heard and probably said, or at least thought at some time in our lives. And that is, but nobody here is disabled. Disability impairments and barriers are not always permanent. They can be temporary or situational. And so by making your content accessible, by educating yourselves in the sorts of adjustments that are widely and often freely available, as I'm going to go into in a minute, or by ensuring adjustments and access to software and hardware can be requested or accessed by a workforce or a student body with as little friction as possible, you're going to be benefiting everyone. So just a little bit of interaction for you. Can somebody give me some examples of a temporary touch impairment? So we have a permanent touch impairment here, which is the loss of an arm, a temporary touch impairment. And I should say this is from Microsoft's Inclusive Design Toolkit. So it's a relatively well-used graphic within the accessibility. So bad arthritis day, CTS, burn, broken limb, having a broken limb, carpal tunnel, brilliant. Fantastic. Dislocated shoulder. Yep. So the example they've given is just arm injury. How about a situational one? Give me a chance to have a drink now. Drink your cup of tea. Oh, that's a really good one. That's a really good point. Yep. Carrying a child. I think somebody may have been cheating. Wet hands being a fantastic example as well. Yeah. And what kind of technologies do you think we'd start thinking about in this kind of arena? Jessie saying swears she didn't cheat. I apologize for that. Yes, voice activation, speech to text. How many of us have been in a situation, for example, where we're cooking and we've got messy hands, and nowadays we just announce to a non-present individual, can you set a timer? I'm going to have to be very careful of saying the name because I've got about 6 around me at the moment, so it'll be triggering all over the place. Not Siri for me, but yes. And again, yeah, Ros saying very hard to press Control or Delete when you have a baby sleeping in your arms. So yeah, these kind of technologies, the face recognition on devices. So I've got a tablet here with face recognition. I have other things that can do thumbprints and that sort of thing. So all these assistances. How about seeing? We'll race through the clicked at the wrong point, so that spoiled that one. How about a situational seeing impairment? Sunlight, glare, yep. Broken glasses, fantastic. Yeah, the one that Microsoft have used here is a distracted driver. I'm always a little bit iffy about that one. It doesn't seem quite right. The kind of technologies that we're thinking about there would be the other way around. So this would be text-to-speech software is the example that they're giving. So one of their presentations, they were talking about having your emails read as you were driving along. I think there are probably better examples, and I think everybody's example of things like glare on a screen being a kind of perfect example of that. But also, as we move to hybrid working and remote working, remote presentations, think about things like the size of a screen. So as Kelly was saying, the people joining using mobile phones, you know, if your content isn't accessible, then they're not going to be able to see it. It's not going to be, it's a situational impairment. So quickly then on to hearing. How about any hearing, temporary hearing impairments? And I won't touch my mouse for now. Stop that jumping. Earwax build up, yes. Tinnitus, yep. Background noise, ear infection, loud music, loud environment. Okay, interesting. So we have temporary here, which is ear infection, and then situational, which would be the louder environment. Again, pointing towards the Microsoft culture that they've gone for a bartender in this one. I'd probably point to more towards things like a commute or a library. So a quiet library. And what kind of technology, big hint there, might we be thinking about in this kind of arena? Yes, subtitles and headset, yeah, needing captions, yeah. So yes, subtitles, captions. So the difference between the two being that captions typically are in the language of the speaker. Subtitles are in the in a foreign language. It provides a translation of a language. But yeah, captioning allows somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing to access content, but it also allows a student sitting in a quiet library to access the same content. It's a universal accessibility consideration. And then speaking, I'm going to skip through very quickly, but they've got laryngitis and heavy accent. I don't particularly like those examples, but speaking is something that I do want to go into because atypical speech is something that's really key for the transcriptions and live captioning that we'll look at in a minute. So now we move to live demos. Right. I'm going to focus on some of the inbuilt technology that many people overlook. It's a really good introduction to the sorts of adjustments that you can make that can make a huge difference to people. Now, these tools can often be presented to employees or students as productivity tools, which can be useful if somebody's struggling with a diagnosis, for example, or with admitting that they might benefit from a bit of assistance. These tools don't need quotes and purchase orders and installation. They're available immediately. So if you have a student who discloses a difficulty, it could be you can just ask, have you tried using? It might be that the inbuilt solution is enough to overcome that initial barrier, or it might be good enough to provide the support for a transition into a full DSA assessment, for example, the Disabled Students Allowance Assessments. My personal soapbox is that using free inbuilt software also enables a student or employee to find out if the solution works for them before they then purchase a more expensive third-party solution. It empowers them to be able to say, this works for me, but only up to this point. This is the limitation that I've run up against, and that's going to help with that justification for a more expensive third-party software. Now, a bit of a caveat before I get started. I've run similar sessions in the past, and they've been nice and slick. Last time I did this, it didn't go particularly well. It wasn't smooth to the point at which I actually had to re-record the session and post it on the recording afterwards because it was a bit disastrous. So what I'm going to do here is just see what I can do, and if it goes wrong, then it goes wrong. I don't mind things going wrong. I don't want to replace things with safe videos. I think it's really important for everyone to see things not working. So when you try, you're not placed in that horrible position of, well, it worked for him, and why is it not working for me? What am I doing wrong? So I'm kind of putting myself a little bit out of my comfort zone just to say to people, it happens. So anyway, we'll give this a go. I'll try and learn from my mistakes and maybe slow down a bit and try not to do too much to begin with. So first off, we're going to look at some speech-to-text software, also known as dictation software. Now, I don't know if anyone tried the dictation in Microsoft a while ago. It used to be pretty awful, very inaccurate. But the great news is it's improved, although, again, constant caveat being it worked fine when I did this in rehearsal. So I'm going to bring up the Microsoft Word. So this is the Word Online. I will look at Google in a minute. And Dictate is here. And it should now, hopefully, start transcribing what I'm saying. Obviously, when I've just slipped up there and said Dicta, it took it up as Victor. But it's doing a reasonably accurate job. In fact, it's probably going to be accurately translating the mistakes I'm making when I'm speaking. But if I say Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, that's not bad in terms of picking up quite quickly. And it also does other things. So what if I ask a question? It's automatically added the punctuation for that. Delete. Delete. So it deletes the last character. So it did delete then, but it deleted the full stop, and that I didn't think that was particularly obvious. So yeah, that'll delete the last word rather than just put the delete, which it used to do. And I'm going to confuse it in a minute. It's going to go horribly wrong. Select paragraph. Underline. Bold. Go to end of line. That's where it started going wrong before. So yeah, because I had the paragraph highlighted, it would then write over the top if it didn't understand what I was saying. But I can now toggle off, underline, bold, and it should now carry on speaking or carry on. Oh, it's picked up the underline again. Anyway, you get the point there. Select point. Align center. So again, you can kind of see, I'm going to switch this off now, reasonably accurate, and it's got much better at things like the formatting of text. I'm going to try one thing here, which I need to get right in order to get, and it's got to be at the right speed as well. So it does start getting a little bit finicky. Add comment, look at this tomorrow. Yes. So yeah, that was one of the things that was going horribly wrong last time. It just kept putting add comment, look at this tomorrow down the page. And yeah, so either I have improved or it's improved since. The other thing that this software is really good for is individuals who might struggle with homophones. So words that sound the same, but look, that are spelt differently. And I'm just going to flick myself back to getting rid of all this format. And yes, I'm using a mouse at the moment. I think underline is still on. They're not sending their cat over there. So again, you can see that that has now picked up the correct time. So it's translating that whole sentence, but it's in context. Now, the other thing that this can do, if I just get to my desktop, is I have a sound file here. Should be able to hear it in a sec.
You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know.
Just a bit from Dr. Seuss there, and under dictate on the bar. So if I can just bring up my tools and zoom in, under dictate here, you have the option to transcribe. You get, I think, 300 minutes per month, and you can just upload a piece of audio. I think I dumped it on my desktop. And we will leave that to do its thing while I flick over to Google, because Google, I don't want to, being a tech agnostic or a company agnostic charity, we want to just give Google a chance. So doc.new, we'll bring up a new Google Doc, hopefully. And then let's go to tools and voice typing. I don't know where I was looking there. Control Shift and S. And then we should be able to just carry on dictating this next piece, new line. New paragraph. Yeah, it's different set of instructions for this one. And new paragraph. I'm not a pheasant plucker, I'm a pheasant plucker's son, and I'm only plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucker comes. Yes, that's a bit of a dangerous one, I find, but it does also highlight there is a feature within this that will asterisk out expletives if you happen to be picked up saying the wrong thing. Not that I ever would, obviously. Sorry, my tablet has gone to sleep as well. And you can do formatting with this as well. Select paragraph. Align center. Text color red. Highlight yellow. Lovely and accessible color combination there. Select paragraph. Apply heading 1. So that also goes to the thing that I brought up in the chat about inaccessible documents and web content because of a lack of headings. Now, just popping back to the Microsoft document, because that should now have, yep, there you go. That's now transcribed it, and we can add that to the document, just the text. Again, I will zoom in over here. With text, with speakers, with timestamps and speakers. So really useful if you're in a group setting or a meeting, you can have the timestamps of what was said and who said it. And that's just from an audio file. And then we'll just add that to the document. So there's not really going to be much for that one, but speaker 1 and speaker 1 have said that. So that's that technology. Moving back to Google, just to carry on, so that the engine that runs the Google transcription is also available as an app in Live Transcribe. And Live Transcribe is a brilliant piece of technology that is effectively subtitles for your everyday life. And let me just show you what I mean, because hopefully I'll be able to connect to my tablet and it will be working. And you can see that live. It's just a black screen on my tablet at the moment, but yeah. So clear that. You can tell now why so much goes wrong. I try and do so much and it all goes horribly, horribly wrong. So this is a really good product. This is a free product from Google. It's just their text-to-speech, speech-to-text engine. And it's running effectively, giving me subtitles to everyday life. Now, if you're in a situation like a university event and you've got the keynote speaker, you've had captions and BSL all kind of arranged for that person, or for anybody deaf or hard of hearing, for example, in the audience. But then you want people to be able to go off. Ideally, you'd want to take the BSL translator, or the BSL interpreter, sorry, with them, but that's not always practical. Resources are, thin, and so this is a real nice kind of a stopgap. It's a bit of a plaster, but it's a really nice piece of software. And as I say, it's free. Anybody can run it on the mobile phone. It's reasonably accurate. The odd thing with this, though, is I don't know if you can see at the bottom, I've got it set to United States. That seems to pick me up better as United States. If I switch to English, unless I put on a proper kind of TM Crumpets accent, it's very, very inaccurate. Now, the other thing that you can do with this, or the other thing that this software does, is picks up all sorts of background noises as well. And I'm going to try this. I've got some examples loaded. So there's a dog barking. I've now got a siren. So I don't know if my microphone's also picking up the sounds. It usually does quite a good job of filtering them out. What was the other one? A laugh. No, I didn't pick that one up, but something like picked up coughing as well. So it's not just the things that people are saying, but it also sets a level of the environment around them, which is fantastic. Now, this same technology is also available as an extension on, or as a part of the Chrome browser. So we have a thing in here that is live transcriptions within Chrome. So any piece of video or audio content, podcasts being the example here. So if I just stop.
It's time for Tweed This Week in Tech. We've got a great show. My old friend from Tech TV, David Spark, returns after a multi-year absence, and Amy Webb is here. That means...
So you can just see the captions on the screen. They'll pick up the individual preferences for those captions from the operating system themselves. So you can make them larger, smaller, give a different kind of coloring, that sort of thing. But again, reasonably accurate and a good way of getting around inaccessible content, for example, podcasts and elements of live events as well. So those will just pop up over YouTube videos, over, yeah, all the content here, all the audio content rather. How am I doing for time? Got 5 minutes. So what else was I going to show you? I was just going to end on a video, I think, because what happens, as I say, when your speech pattern is what we call atypical, when you don't talk like other people, where you would say that you are difficult to understand. And this same technology has been used initially in a project called Project Euphonia by Google, but this is now morphed into Project Relate, and I will just show you that video because it is one of those. Tech is brilliant. So I just pop that on.
Communication is a fundamental human need, and I think it's also a basic human right. I'm Andre Lee, a brand manager at Google. More specifically, I'm a namer, and it's a lot of fun to say that I'm a professional namer. I had a type of muscular dystrophy that affects the way I speak. I have always loved making new friends, but when people can't understand me at first, they have trouble getting to know me. It's as if there's an invisible barrier between us. I believe technology can help bring down that barrier.
My name is Julie Catio. I'm a product manager at Google in the research team. Project Relate started in 2018 when we realized that our speech recognition technology could be improved to help people with speech impairments be better understood. Standard speech recognition doesn't always work as well for people with atypical speech because the algorithms have not been trained on samples of their speech. So we decided to create an app that would be custom trained on individuals' unique speech patterns.
We named the app Librarians because of what it enables you to do.
To use the app, the first step is to record a set of phrases so it can get to know how you speak. The Relate app has 3 built-in features: Listen, Repeat, and Assistant. Listen transcribes everything you're saying in real time.
So I have a custom voice model now, and
Repeat repeats what you've just said in a clear computerized voice.
next thing I do, hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate.
Ah, gotcha.
Thank you.
Assistant connects directly with your Google Assistant.
Take a selfie.
Okay, get ready.
I hope I live to see the day when disabled people can move through the world and expect the same level of connection as everyone else has. I think Project Relate is bringing us closer to a better future.
Right, and again, 3 minutes to spare, but I can go over to any questions now. A lot to cover, I guess. Are there instruction guides to somewhere? Yes, we do have several on our My Computer My Way website, so or on the AbilityNet website. So I will pop that in the chat. A couple of comments about holding breath.
I think that was your pheasant. I'm not even going to say it, but that was your brave man. Oh, Adam, I'm absolutely blown away by this technology, and it's just there hiding in plain sight that we don't know. It's awful that we're not encountering this day to day, but the difference that could make. And I think we're about to have a break, but I think everyone's just going to open up a Word doc and now try this for themselves if you're anything like me. And we'll make sure, that's great if there's guides. Oh, that looks fantastic. So we'll make sure they're shared in the post-event email, and yeah, if we can pop them in the chat as well, that'd be amazing. But thank you so much. If anyone's got any last minute questions for Adam, please do pop them in. Can you remind us of the name of the Google tablet app you were using?
Yeah, that's Live Transcribe. Oh, without the capital R on that one, typing too quickly. Should have dictated. But yeah, it's a free app from Google. Microsoft does have something similar that's a translation app that works incredibly well with PowerPoint and does some great things with that. But it's not quite as straightforward in terms of the interface. So give Microsoft a bit of a plug there as well, because they're doing good things in accessibility. But yeah, the Google app is Live Transcribe, and it's free.
It's quite often it's an area where it's very easy to feel frustrated, but this actually feels so optimistic, and you can see things going in the right direction. Certainly not before time, but I know we feel very inspired, very optimistic after that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think everyone, if we don't have any questions, and that's Kelly. Kelly's having to leave us, so thank you, Kelly, as well. It's just been, wow, what a treat for our first half. I think you've all earned a break. You've all been interacting, participating. It's been wonderful to see. We are going to take a short break now until 2:15, 2:15. When you come back, I will, through the magic of Zoom, have put you into 2 breakout rooms, and then we'll have both our workshops running simultaneously so that everybody gets to participate. So you'll be in one room or the other. I'll be in one. Jill from ARLG, Jill is there, she will be in the other. So we're there to lend a hand if you need anything. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've learned so much. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic.
Hi, everybody. Have fun.
Thanks, everyone.
So it's lovely to see you all here. I hope you've had a sufficient break after all that excitement in the first half. Even as an assistive technologist and specialising in this area, there were still things I picked up from there. That's what's great about coming together and learning from other people as well. So I'm going to talk about I put down to talk about the future of alternative formats, and it's something that's been very much in the front of my mind, really. In
my previous role as an assistive technologist, I specialized in all the sorts of things that you were seeing demonstrated today. So the speech to text, the text to speech. And I hadn't done a huge amount of work on alternative formats. But when I applied for my job at St Andrews, I discovered it was in the job description. So I've been in there for 6 months now, and started looking at alternative formats. And one thing that I was quite excited about, I'll just move my slide on. Sorry, I should have done an introduction first. So my name is Ros Walker. I'm at the University of St Andrews. My background is actually in learning technologies, but I've specialised in digital accessibility for about 6 years now. And the alternative formats are a third of my job, with another third being assistive technologies and the final third being accessibility training and awareness across the university. So when I started at St Andrews, I discovered this cute little building called the Alternative Formatting Suite. And this had been set up some years ago as a dedicated building for producing alternative formats. It had a network of volunteers from the community, many of whom were retired academics who would come in and help with these alternative formats. Inside were 2 audio booths that are fully soundproofed. So when you sit inside them, you have no sound at all, and you can speak and you can record things. And it had a lot of computers and equipment inside for scanning as well. And at one stage, this was a hub of activity producing alternative formats for the students at St Andrews. So they were able to produce initially audio cassettes that then became CDs after a time. And we had this resource, but because of the pandemic, it had been closed down for 2 years. Also, the staff member was no longer with the university. And so when I moved into the role, I was asked to think about what we would do with this alternative formatting suite. I should add, it doesn't have any water or facilities. So it wasn't quite as comfortable because you have to nip out anytime you need a drink or the loo. So anyway, I started thinking about things. We had a Braille embosser and a Braille printer, and I'm going to pick your brains now. What do you think those have largely been replaced with now? Any suggestions? You can either, because we're a smallish group, you can speak out if you want to, or type in the chat. Okay, so we've got a mention of JAWS. JAWS is software that will speak out loud on the computer. There's another piece of software that does that as well, called NVDA, which is a free version. JAWS you can use for 40 minutes without paying, but they're useful for testing things. Census Access is a format converter. We might have a look at that soon. A Braille display device and RNIB for formats which can be narrated. I'll come back to a couple of those. The one that I actually put down as a direct replacement. So rather than feeling the dots on the page, this is called a Braille sense machine. And what happens with this is that all of these little pins at the front of it will rise and fall to produce the Braille. And when you get to the end, you hit a button and then it gives you the next line. And if you watch somebody using this, it's quite incredible the speed at which they move across the display. There's a fantastic lady called Haben Girma, who she's actually deaf blind, and somebody will listen for her and type into a device, and that relays to her Braille sense so that she can read from it. So that's the Braille sense machine. And I've seen several students now arriving at university where we've not needed to produce these Braille printouts or emboss, that we've actually been able to use the Braille sense machines. So I mentioned that the alternative formatting suite was producing a lot of audio cassettes or CDs. What do you think we're producing now? If you want to pop something in the chat or say something. MP3. Digital media on platforms. Yeah. Accessible documents for JAWS or NVDA. Streaming media. Yeah, we've got some of that as well. Okay, so there's some good things coming through there. I think the one that I've actually chosen is the immersive reader in Word. I don't know how familiar you are with that. Let me just see if I can risk a live screen share quickly. I'm just going to try and open a document. Let's open my notes that I've been taking from today. So I've taken these notes here, and I can just get it to read aloud. I can actually just highlight a bit and click on the read aloud button. I don't know if you're hearing this or not. Are you actually hearing that?
We're not hearing it, I don't think, but we can see it going.
You can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to leave it at, I don't know if I should probably have clicked a button to show it, but we also have something. If I go into view, we now have something called the immersive reader. So if I click onto the immersive reader, it actually displays the text for me in a different way. It spreads it all out a little bit more, and I can choose a lot of this. So I can choose a column width. I can choose the background to the page color like this. I can choose the text spacing. I can even highlight syllables if I want to, and then I can get it to read aloud. And if I want to, I can focus in on lines in the middle. So I can click onto the read aloud. And I have a button here to select the reading speed and the voice. And one thing that I've discovered for myself, after working with some blind students and seeing how they were using JAWS or NVDA in particular, I discovered that actually with the reading speed, I could read documents by really upping the reading speed, so I can listen very, very fast now. And if it's highlighting at the same time, I find it actually much easier myself. I have no diagnosed disability. I just find it an easier way to read a document nowadays. So that's in Word in the immersive reader. So I'll just go back to my PowerPoint presentation. I've probably just revealed the answers to the next one, but the answers that you gave were all perfectly good as well, that many of the things that previously we'd have had to be very time consuming putting them on digital, onto cassettes and onto CDs, we can now view in a digital way. So large print, what would we suggest for large print now? Screen reader, screen display tools, rendering, HTML, docs that reflow, zoom on apps and screen magnification. Yeah, almost everything accessible piece of software. And it's so important what Kelly was saying earlier about making sure that comes into procurement. We can just resize it. So obviously, if we're on a device, we can just do that pinch and resize on the screen. On Word, you've got the little slider on the bottom. So I now, as I'm aging and I need my glasses and things, I'm up to 125% on most things that I look at. But that ability to resize things, a lot of the students who are visually impaired now find that they can actually still see a little bit and can just use magnification to work with. I'll give you an example of that very soon. And printing onto coloured paper. I know at one stage I spent a lot of time with cream paper, printing onto coloured paper. What do we use now? Any suggestions into the chat? Screen filters, overlays. The immersive reader, yeah, well spotted. Background color change on reading apps, custom backgrounds on browser and applications. Yes, there's lots and lots of different applications now that will allow you to change that background color. So I'll put down here using a screen tint. There's various different bits of software. If you go to AbilityNet, you can find lists of these. I won't list all of them now, but where previously we would have printed out things for people onto different colored paper, they can now use it on screen and apply that screen tint. So all of this seems to be pointing to one thing. Does anybody want to spell it out for me? I think it's fairly obvious. Immersion. Anybody? Accessibility benefits for everyone, definitely, because if I look back through the things that we've got there, user preferences, all of these very relevant. I think there's one key word that I was looking for that it hasn't actually come up yet, but it's about digital. It's basically the fact that everything is going digital. There we are. Shamal's just said digitization. So accessibility less about coming to a physical, but absolutely, yes, the fact that things are digitized. And this is the big transition that many of you will have seen through COVID. And we all know it was happening long before that. I don't know what acceleration rate you think COVID gave to your particular institution, but certainly I was previously at Stirling University, and we reckoned that it was about 5 years that we managed to condense into that 1 year, the first year of COVID, in terms of what we wanted to do digitally. So there are lots of things that have changed by this move to digital. Now, one of the sad things for me is that this lovely little building called the Alternative Format Suite, when we started looking at it and we started looking at our learners and who was using it, we realized that there really wasn't a need for a person to be sat in that building anymore, actually producing digital copies, producing alternative formats, because so much of what was available was now digital. So I think there are some key things that we need to take into account. Users need a suitable digital electronic device, so a computer, tablet, or assistive technology, and the digital content to work with. So even with the digital versions, some people will still be requiring assistive technologies, such as JAWS, NVDA, a screen reader for dyslexia, and many other things like that. But many of these are now built in. So I put forward some questions, but I was just going to take you on another little live tour before we come to those. And I was going to show you a couple of the tools that I now work with. So just because we now have many digital versions doesn't mean that everything doesn't require a digital format, an alternative format. One of the first things that happened to me when I started at the university, we have a PhD student who is doing some research, and many of the books that he wants to use are still not digitized. And one of the very first books that he came up with for me, it was a book about St. Paul in the New Testament. It had 5 different languages in it. And bear in mind that I hadn't really done much by way of alternative formats beforehand. So the piece of software that I was using was the Abi Fine Reader. How many of you use that? Do you want to just give me an indication in the chat? I can see some hands up. It's a great language in that I can it's a great piece of software because I can specify the languages that I'm using. So you can see here that I've got English, French, German, Greek, and Hebrew. And the software scans and then recognizes, but I can make adjustments to the pages. And then it shows me on each one of these how accurate it thinks it is. So if I look at a page like this, I can see my scan, and I can also see what it's rendered it as. And if I go through to verify, it shows me here that it's got 129 in the text, and it's written that as 129. So I can just skip that one and say that I'm happy that that has been recognized correctly. So 1 Thessalonians, it's recognized as 1 Thessalonians. And I do find that a lot of the time I'm just sitting here going click, click, click. And then I get to a point where it's got VV for verses, and it's written a W instead. And so I would go in and correct that. So it's a little bit tedious, but actually I quite enjoy it. I try and set myself sort of an hour or 2 a day just to sit and do this when I'm working on a book. And the scanning didn't take me nearly as long as I thought it would do. But interestingly, one of the big problems that we still have at the university, we use a system called Ally. And if I look at our Moodle course in the VLE here, I've got my own sandbox. I didn't think it was fair to pick on somebody's actual course. And we can view here an accessibility report. So when I click on this, it tells me how accessible that particular course is. And it tells me what the content of that course is, what has been added to it. So I've got PDF, Word, images and things. It highlights where there are accessibility problems and flags the content with the easiest issues to fix and the low scoring content. And I can go through and correct these things. But one of the things that I see very often is the document is scanned but not OCR'd. And this goes back to members of staff scanning their own things and not OCRing them, OCR optical character recognition. So the sort of thing that I was just showing you, I use in the Abby Fine Reader. I've got an example of one here that I pulled off earlier today. And this one is a document. And the reason that I know it hasn't had OCR, I can actually, this is in the Edge browser. If I'm using the Edge browser, it has a built-in read aloud. So when I click onto this, it's looking now through for text that it could actually read to me. And it's not finding anything in there because the whole thing is an image and the text isn't perceivable. You know, Kelly was talking about that things must be perceivable. In this particular one, it can't perceive the text. Because it's just a picture, the characters haven't been recognized. So this is a document that I can pull into Abby Fine Reader and I can do some recognition on it. It's not great either in that we've actually got these lines down the middle that could cause problems with recognition because of the color differences that are available there. So those are some of the main tools that I'm using. I'll just show you again that this reader does work. If I go in and just choose a document here. Oh, I was going to open that online. I'll just go into Wikipedia. It's always a nice, easy one to show you. So if I go into Wikipedia and I now click on to read aloud here. So you can see that this is working through. And if I highlight something, it'll just start reading it to me. So using the read aloud function in Edge is a good way of testing accessibility. So back to the PowerPoint and some questions, and I'd really welcome your feedback at this point. We've got about 10 minutes or so. So one of the questions that I asked was, how do we develop resilience in learners so that they rely less on specialist formatting? And I've put down suitable training in specific aspects of using electronic content, and this will vary from user to user. Making the best software available so that people actually have the right software to use. And also making sure that staff are producing accessible content in the first place, the accessibility check to ensure that scans are done properly. But what ideas do you have? What's your thinking about helping people so that we don't need these alternative formats, so that we are actually producing accessible content from the outset? Any comments from anybody? You can open microphones if you want to, because there's not a huge number of you here.
I suppose.
Hi, was that Richard was speaking?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if my mic was working there.
Yes, yep, we can hear you.
I suppose one of the sort of ground up sort of approaches ties into the suitable training aspect of things. In you talked about immersive technologies and stuff earlier, and just building that into not necessarily having accessibility training, but having the training based, have accessibility immersed within the training that staff receive. Is one of the ways to kind of integrate it, in my opinion.
Yes, it's a really good point. And we use a phrase sometimes called born accessible, that things are actually accessible from the outset. Unfortunately, with Ally, one of the things that we're often doing is going back and retrofitting accessibility, and it can be very, very time consuming and sometimes doesn't produce a great result. So actually that embedding accessibility from the outset, asking people to make things accessible from the start. Emma, you've put your hand up.
Hello. Yeah, I think you pretty much said what I was going to say is when it comes to creating content is to have that framework in place where you have the list of things you've got to make sure you've got to apply, and to have that framework across the library, essentially something we're trying to build at the moment, because we are literally going back, particularly the stuff we've done in a rush over the pandemic, fixing all the things that we hadn't done it in the first place. So yeah, definitely something that we need to build on.
It's a really good point, actually. One of the things that I've worked on since I joined St Andrews, I've actually built a little course that we call Digital Accessibility Basics. So it looks at making your formats flexible. So basically encouraging people to use Word or a page in the VLE rather than a PDF. Headings, fonts, language, hyperlinks, colors, alt text, graphs, charts and diagrams, tables, closed captions, and then I've done a special section on academic accessibility. But we're hoping to encourage all of our staff to take that course within the next year or so to try and embed that accessibility into whatever they create. But we're also aware that a lot of people roll over their content from year to year. So it's also looking at that content that's already there and seeing how that could be improved.
That looks really, really useful, that list. And I think, again, it's providing a way, it doesn't make it too overwhelming, because I think a lot of people feel, oh, it's a lot of time to dedicate to it. Obviously, it's important and you have to, but yeah, where do you start, sort of thing. So I really like that format you've put it in.
I am asking if, I would like to make it available on a Creative Commons basis. So
Yes,
I will let you know. Right, okay. I'll see if we can share that with Philips and make that available to you. So I've tried to inject some fun into it, because I do have this worry that when you say digital accessibility, it has the sex appeal of health and safety. There's nobody is going to get excited by the words digital accessibility, but when you see end users and you see what a difference it makes to them, those tweets that were shared earlier about independence and about, the time it saves people in having to chase things, then I think that's where you see the fun coming into digital accessibility. And there's little things that we can do that make a big difference to lots of people. Okay, I'll just move on to my next slide if I can find it. Sorry, I'm not doing this in a very organized way, am I? So there will still be some cases that require adjustments. So I think one of the key things there is about suitable training in specific aspects of using the electronic content. And this will vary from user to user. This was one thing that confused me like mad last year when I was very first scanning these books. And I was looking at the fact that I was scanning books, but then converting it into a PDF or a Word document, and that the page numbers on the books were not tallying with the page numbers on the Word document, and they were actually, because I was scanning a book that was in Times New Roman or a similar font, they weren't in Arial or Sequoia UI, one of the fonts that I would normally use. So I'm thinking, I'm scanning something and it doesn't work, because the page numbers don't tie up and the fonts don't tie up. And then I started to think about more related to the end user. And I contacted the student, the learner, and said, how do you need this? And I actually ended up sending him 2 or 3 samples, and he didn't mind the Times New Roman because he was going to be listening to it. So he wasn't looking at it anyway. So I had to start learning about this, making adjustments for individuals with that. And I did have to buy the Abby Fine Reader. I have also bought Adobe DC Pro, and I couldn't do my job without those 2 tools. They are so essential. I'm guessing that a lot of you will have access to those in your libraries already. So anything else that you think may still require an adjustment? I know the Adobe DC Pro is painfully expensive. I think it's £8 a month for a single user license. So it does mean that I get quite a lot of PDFs channeled through me because people just want a final check on them to check they're okay. So okay, I think that's possibly one to go away and think about, but I think just because we produce everything digitally, there will still be some cases where we are producing some alternative formats. And so in the final thing that I was going to look at for the future is the preparing of alternative formats. If we have books or documents, who prepares these? So who can do it? What training do they need? And what hardware or software do they need? And these questions came to me really because I knew that previously we'd used this pool of volunteers. Sadly, a lot of them have dropped out because of COVID and have not wanted to come back into the university. There's also less need for the number of people that we had, but there are comments about, well, we can just get some students to do it. We'll pay the students to do it. But actually, I think in some ways, some of it is quite specialised. So I'd really welcome your thoughts, what your universities do or what you see as the future for producing these alternative formats. Shamal, do you want to unmute? There should be a button on the bottom of your screen, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ros. With regard to your previous point, you mentioned about the accessibility from the outset, or with this point now that what we would like to see. I had a meeting not long ago with one of the assist persons about one of the students that I look after, provide alternative formats for. How likely do you see the possibility of taking back, as you said to the outset, putting this responsibility on publishers or probably the authors to provide? I know maybe it's big and a big ask from publishers, but depends, I suppose, how many authors, how many universities, how many academics, raise this point. What do you think?
It's a really, really good. I've just moved on to my next slide, actually, because the final thing that I was going to talk about was the sourcing of alternative formats. And obviously here is somewhere where we can start to put some pressure onto the publishers. Unfortunately, a lot of what I've been digitizing has come from the 50s, 60s and 70s, and the publishers simply don't have digital versions still available. So that's the point at which I've been able to go to RNIB Bookshare, which is brilliant, and I have managed to source some things from there. And actually what I'm making sure of is that everything that I prepare, I'm also donating back again to them. I've also managed to get a couple of things from the original authors, where there have been authors. So I had one that was conference papers, and I did manage to get some digital content from them. And also the British Library does do some digital content now as well. So I will always try all of these before I get the book and start scanning. And actually, I suspect that many of you have far more experience than I do in this. So I feel like, teaching grandma to suck eggs or whatever it is, but it is always worth going through all of these lists and looking at where you might source things for first. But yeah, definitely.
My point is on, I do use, like you mentioned, RNIB, so research everything before going to through the process of digitizing. But the case I mentioned, it was about a student who's got no vision at all and uses immersive reader, and it wants the text obviously in a specific way that, nothing else, because it's concentrating on listening. So what I do, I take off everything and provide, graphs, diagrams, everything taken out, and the responsibility is on me to paraphrase for the diagrams or replace, provide text for descriptions for those, which I managed, to be honest, to put this responsibility, because I objected, put this responsibility on the academic staff for this one student. But I realize the volume of stuff that we have to deal with, if you're putting this responsibility on academic staff, again, it's too much. So I think the best step is to go to the publishers and ask for those students with no visibility, where I shouldn't be responsible to provide text for, I don't know if it's psychology, if it's medicine, if it's mathematics, if it's all these different subjects. That's my point, to be honest.
And I think it's a really good thought for one of our final thoughts. This morning I was asked about digitize or how we could make accessible about 400 photos for archaeology.
Yeah.
So there will always be a case for alternative formats and for the specialism of working with these. So it's just something that we can all take away and think about. But I hope I've shared a little bit of my journey with you and hopefully picked up some useful things. And I think, Kirsten, it's time to swap groups, is it?
It is perfect timing. Oh, thank you so much, Ros. I think that just sums up. I feel like we're on the cusp of a new ethos with accessibility. That idea of everything being born accessible, that's going to stick with me. And hopefully it's going to be more holistic and impactful in the future. So thank you so much for those insights. And thanks to everyone for participating so enthusiastically. I'm going to pause the recording now. Now, I should be able to skillfully remove, or otherwise, Ros, you're going to come with me to room number 1. We're going to drag Huw out in a friendlier way than that sounds, and we'll be back in a minute. So just hang tight, everyone, and our session 2 will start very soon. Thanks. Great, and whenever you're ready, Huw, thanks so much for joining us. It's over to you.
No problem. Let's see if we can share this. Right, can you see that?
We can, looks great, thank you.
You can, you're all good, fantastic, thank you. Hello, everyone. I've just whizzed through this on the other room. It's a kind of whistle-stop tour of some resources for accessible resources for librarians. I called it Hack Accessibility. We almost made it through to the final slide on the other session. I think we missed out on one slide, so I will race through, but please do ask questions, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. So without further ado, I will start. I'm Huw Alexander. I work for textBOX. The company's focus is mainly on image description services for publishers, but we also provide the Aspire service for accessibility statements and the SearchBOX directory. So I'm going to talk about accessibility statements in SearchBOX directory today. We're going to talk about some procurement and I provide some kind of resources around procurement and contracts. And then we're going to talk about some kind of other stuff. By that point, I've run out of words to call things. So we'll call it stuff and things, and that's towards the end. And hopefully we'll have some time for some questions as well. So Kellie talked about public sector bodies accessibility regulations, PS-BAR, earlier. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but part of PS-BAR was the requirement to have an accessibility statement for the institution, so the university, the college, the library, but also for third-party content. So if you've bought ebook platforms, journal platforms, things like that, you're responsible for them having an accessibility statement. So that kind of puts you in quite a difficult position as a library or a university or a college, because you've got this pressure from the legislation. And if you've purchased content and you really need that content, that ebook content or the journal content, and they don't have an accessibility statement, it's your responsibility to actually write it. Which can be, quite a lot of work, because some libraries, I've worked with the University of Kent recently, they had about 350 different platforms at the library. So that's a lot of content and a lot of accessibility statements. the problem the university has is that the risk is theirs. If the government find that content isn't accessible, then they can take action against the university. They're not going to take action against the provider, the ebook platform. It's the procurement, the procurer of that content. So the university or the library is in this kind of unenviable position almost. They have that risk about having purchased that content, that they have to have purchased accessible content. So let's talk about accessibility statements from two sides in a way. For Aspire, we have Aspire Education, which looks at the statements that need to be prepared for a university or a college or a library. But we also look at statements from third parties, so from publishers and from platform vendors, ebook or journal vendors. So we'll kick off with Aspire Education, which is the version for universities and colleges. So it's based on the GDS, the Government Digital Services template statement, which is mostly used by, or used mostly by the universities and colleges. I did a survey recently of the universities and colleges with accessibility statements. 99% of universities now have an accessibility statement in place, which is great. And 80% of colleges in the UK have an accessibility statement in place. So that's really fantastic and a big improvement since I did a survey 2 years ago and it was much lower. So those statements are really based on the GDS framework, on the kind of template statement that they provided on their website. The Aspire Education version goes a little bit further. It's based on the FACS model, which I designed with Alistair McNaught. And basically what we're looking for in the statement is that it's formative, that it makes your users smarter, that it's actionable, that it helps users be more resilient. It's compliant with the kind of the regulations and legislation that the government in place, so that you're not at risk. That the statement should be transparent, that it keeps disabled users on board, and also that that statement is supportive, that it makes users confident. So a user or a reader can go to that website accessibility statement and get the information that they need. I'm not going to read all this out, there's quite a lot of information on there, but the FACS criteria are focused in three main areas, which is communication, content, and the user experience. Now, the user experience is the main aspect that's been added. So we found that the framework statement from the GDS was kind of like a tick box exercise. It was like, oh, have we done this? Have we done that? Which is great for those kind of that compliance section. But we wanted the statement to be much more user focused. So we've included information about things like color and contrast. Can you navigate with a screen reader around the website? Menu navigation. Menus are a real problem for screen readers. You know, when you're on a website and you've got a menu across the top and you can click on it and it has a drop-down menu. A lot of the time, you can't actually tab into that drop-down menu. So you can't access most of the content on a website, which is kind of frustrating for a screen reader user. So things like that, some more practical aspects of the kind of accessibility statement, and providing that information, kind of really usable information for the readers. We've provided the Aspire Education guidelines. There's a link there. You can download the guidelines. It's all free, and you can take a look and see if they can be applied to your statement. Can you make your statement a bit more user-friendly, a bit more user-focused, and make it a much more useful document for your students? We've basically created a structure for the statement which is fivefold. So there's an introduction to everything. There's the things that work, there's the things that don't work, and there's workarounds for actually making those things work. And there's things that help, and then there's things we're working on. And things we're working on is a really important part of a statement, and it's often overlooked in the statements that I kind of look at from universities and colleges. It's basically creating a roadmap. These are the things that we know are wrong with the website, and these are the things we're going to fix, and this is when we're going to fix it. You're basically addressing the needs of your users, because your users are probably flagged up potential issues, and you're saying, actually, yes, we've recognized that and we're going to address that. So you're kind of having a conversation with the users, which is a great experience for the users themselves of the website. They can see that you're actually engaged. So always recommending to have a roadmap on your accessibility statement. And a statement should be three things. It should be a user guide. Instead of just like that kind of checklist of, oh, we've done this, we've done that, fine, brilliant. It should be a user guide. It should be a destination for students to go find out information, find out new information as well. Don't just write a statement and then forget about it and say, oh yeah, we've done that. The legislation came in 2020. Have a look at your statement. How often has it been updated? I've seen statements that have never been updated since the legislation came in. And I'm sure things have happened in those 2 years. So it's about telling your story of what you've done to make improvements for accessibility of the website. The statement is also a marketing tool. You're telling the story of what you've done for your students, how you've interacted, engaged with your students, how you've thought about, oh, we want to have a really fantastic experience for our users. If a prospective student is looking at your accessibility statement and seeing a lot of information, it's a fantastic marketing outlet for the university. It's telling a great story about the university or the college. And again, it's also an engagement forum. That kind of idea of the roadmap. You're listening to your students, you're addressing the issues, you're identifying those issues, and you're saying when you're actually going to fix them. So potentially, oh, we've got a problem with our menus, we're going to fix that in Q3 2022. So you're actually providing and conveying information to users that they can act on. I just include this example. I used this in a talk I gave for a US audience a couple of months ago. I blanked out the institution involved for them, but for you, I can tell you this is Harvard Libraries, University Libraries accessibility statement. Now, this isn't just the introduction. This is it. This is the whole thing. And it's not really telling the story. It's kind of, we're committed to providing accessible content and services and basically saying, if you have any problems, ask a librarian. It's not really conveying much information. If you compare this to probably your statement that you've got for your institution, you'll see that yours is a lot better. So I thought this is kind of an interesting example of not really conveying enough information for the user. The user's not really learning much from this. It's all aspirational. The flip side of Aspire is we assess statement and we audit publishers and platforms. I'm going to concentrate on platforms, ebook platforms, journal platforms today. And we audit them against a range of criteria, things like do they provide contact details? Simple things like this. You kind of you'll be surprised at how many publishers don't provide contact details. What are the response times? If you're asking for accessible files, digital files, how long does it take for a publisher or a platform to provide those? What are the DRM settings? Do they employ digital rights management, which is quite restrictive? And can they provide DRM-free content, which is much easier to use and much more compatible with a screen reader? Do they work with accessibility services such as RNIB Bookshare? So we audit their statement, the publishers and the platforms, against all this information. And then we talk about the platform statement in terms of communication. Do they communicate information well to their users and to their readership? What kind of content do they provide? And do they provide EPUBs, PDFs, all that kind of thing? And what's the user experience like? Can the user navigate very easily through the platform? Can they change things like color and contrast? Can they personalize their experience? So we're trying to gather together a lot of information And then we put that into the Aspire list. So we have a list for platforms and for publishers. This example here is the platform list, and we rank them basically. So you'll see this is a live example. So ProQuest have got 3 platforms with 100% score. There's EBSCO's on there, Sage, JSTOR, Oxford Academic, Cambridge Core. So a lot of the big publishers and platforms have achieved 100% score for their Aspire audit, but which is a great improvement from what it was just a couple of years ago. So when we launched Aspire in 2018, the average score for a platform was 23%. And the average score for a publisher was 12%, which is pretty appalling. But as you can see from here, we've made some real good improvements. We've got 20 publishers and platforms with scores of 100% now. Whereas before we only had 2 publishers that even got into the gold range, which is above 75%. So you can see there's a big improvement. And it wasn't necessarily that publishers and platforms were doing a terrible job of accessibility, but they were doing a terrible job of telling the story of their accessibility. Their statements were terrible. They were just saying things like, we're committed to accessibility, but they're not actually conveying any information. So we're slowly kind of encouraging, shall we say, publishers and platforms to improve the information they're providing. As you can see, there's still a long tail to go, but we're making good progress. So it's nice to see. And the Aspire list is freely available, so librarians can look at the Aspire list for platforms and publishers and see which platforms have scored highly in the accessibility statement. So that's a good indication as part of your procurement process for purchasing that content. Just quickly, these are a selection of the publishers and platforms that have achieved 100% score. So you've got things like Oxford Academic, Cambridge Core, JSTOR, ProQuest, the kind of usual suspects. I'm sure all of you've got content from these guys, Emerald, EBSCO, VitalSource. But they've really engaged with Aspire and really improved the quality of their accessibility statements and the information that they're providing to their users. Next up, I just want to talk about SearchBox. Just have a drink. And SearchBox is another service we run. SearchBox is a directory. It started off as a directory of just publishers and ebook platforms. And back in the day, I used to work for Sage. And there was a service called Publisher Lookup, which was run, I think, jointly by JISC and the Publishers Association, I want to say. And it provided contact details for publishers. So if you wanted accessibility statement or information about accessibility statements or accessible files, then you could go there and it would have the contact details of that publisher, and you could contact them and hopefully get the files through. And I like this idea. It was a really useful platform, but it disappeared in 2016. It retired and doesn't exist anymore. And I thought it was a really useful resource. So I decided when I set up textBOX to create SearchBox, which is the kind of the predecessor, forerunner, the next thing after Publisher Lookup. And it's bigger. Publisher Lookup had about 200, I think, publishers in it. SearchBox now has 7,500 entries. So we've kind of got a huge amount of content in there. And what you can do, you can sign up for SearchBox directory. It's a free service again, and you can access the database. So we have all the publishers, mainly focused on English language publishers, but we do have other languages as well. So it's US, Australian, all the Canadian publishers, all the UK-based publishers. But we also have all the imprints. So if you're looking for a particular book from an imprint, you're thinking, oh, who publishes this imprint now? And it's usually Cengage or Elsevier. You can look up, so we've mapped all the imprints to the publishers, but we've also expanded, we've included all the universities in there, all the colleges, all the university libraries. We've included information from SUC, so it also has digital providers outside of publishers, so companies that provide information like video captioning, things like that. We've got all the details of them, the contact details. So Searchbox directory has contact details, addresses, email addresses, links to the accessibility statement, all of these things. So hopefully it contains the information that you require for third-party content. So if you're want to look up ProQuest's accessibility statement or a link to their VPAT, the link will be included in the directory. The directory is a members only process. It's a free process. It's just sign up with your email address. But if you don't want to use that, you can use Searchbox Finder, which is a kind of a lightweight version of Searchbox, and you can look up the accessibility statements there. It has all the links, so it's quite an easy way to look up the content. As I say, there's 7,500 entries in Searchbox now, and it gets bigger all the time. It's kind of crowdsourced, so librarians contact me and say, oh, we found another publisher or another platform or something else, and we add that to the platform. And there's 750 members, or just over 750 members now. So it's a really good community in terms of providing updates and information about new vendors. And as I say, perfectly free and always will be. These are a couple of examples of third-party kind of uses it's been used for third-party content. This is an extract from the accessibility statement for Ayrshire College, and they've shown how Searchbox can be embedded in the statement, and you can link out and say, oh, you can find accessibility statements for our digital products on Searchbox. Similar has been done for Edinburgh and Napier University's statement as well. So that's just some language that you can pop into your statement if you wanted to. And we've also worked with the University of Kent recently. Kent have created a digital resources directory. So it's all of the ebook platforms, journal platforms that they use in their library. There's about 350 in total, and the links included in their directory link to Searchbox. So all the accessibility statements for each of those platforms are provided by Searchbox. So that's another service we provide. Right, on to procurement and contracts. How are we doing? Fine. Are we good for time? I think maybe. I'll keep on going, it'll be fine. There was a thumbs up there. We'll race through it. Just a recommendation to build accessibility into contracts with third-party vendors. I know this is easier said than done because contracts come and go. They may be long, multi-year contracts. But if your contracts are up for renewal, make sure to rewrite them and include a passage on accessibility. It protects you. You're liable for the accessibility of content now. So make sure that your contracts do have a paragraph on accessibility, and make sure that your digital vendors are including accessible, the platforms are accessible with accessible content. I'm recommending here to work with organisations like JISC, SUPC, which is the Southern Universities Procurement Consortia, and APUC, which is the Advanced Procurement for Universities up in Scotland, and they work together as a partnership as well. Aspire work with SUPC, so every vendor, if you're on the SUPC framework, every vendor for digital publications has to have a gold Aspire score. So they're all kind of pre-approved, as it were. So if you're working through SUPC, you should have accessible platforms through them. This is just an example of contract language from, and this is taken from the Big Academic Alliance, which is the big 10 universities in the USA, but they also provide a huge amount of resources and international language. So I just thought I'd include this as an example of language that you can include in the contract, basically saying you're requiring your vendors, digital vendors, to be compliant with WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA, which should be a good start. And that's what the GDS accessibility statement template is based on. It's based on WCAG 2.1. Another resource is California State University. California have really stringent accessibility laws and have had them for quite some years, and they're actually kind of stronger than the rest of the United States. But California State University have got a really great system in place for procuring digital content, and they've made all of it very transparent. So you can go onto their website and see a huge amount of information. You can see all the workflows they go through in procuring content. And I just thought I'd flag this page, which is about roles and responsibilities, because often case it's difficult to know who is responsible for which area of procurement, especially for accessible content. So they step-by-step breakdown of everyone's role in the process, and it's just a really useful site. They've been wonderfully open with their kind of resources, so I thought I'd provide that link for you. Oh, and by the way, I'm sharing the slides to this, so please don't be photo screenshotting or writing everything down. All the links will be provided in the slides, so because they're quite long as well. Nobody wants to write out URLs. Another example from this is from the University of Melbourne. They do fantastic range of resources, but I thought I'd flag up. They've got a procurement flowchart or a decision. They call it a flowchart. So it's actually kind of a decision tree. This is just the introduction to it. It goes on and on and on. You have to scroll through it. It has so much information. It's really well structured. It's really simply designed, but it basically takes the whole workflow for purchasing digital content and makes it into a really useful flowchart. So well worth exploring if you're designing a new process or wanting to refresh your workflows. This is a video from AbilityNet, our friends from earlier. This was back in 2020, but I watched it last week and it's still very relevant. It's fantastic. I think it's an hour-long session on checking external products and whether they're testing them for whether they're accessible. Abby James used to be at AbilityNet at that time. She's now head of accessibility for Barclays Bank. So she really knows her stuff. So well worth exploring if you're having any issues with testing content as part of the procurement process. And this is a quote from Melissa Steiner, who kindly said that the Aspire scores make it easy for us to see which vendors we should be working with. Now, Melissa's at Birkbank, so it's another route for you to use as part of your procurement process is look at the Aspire score. Has that vendor got a good score? If they have, then fantastic, work our way through it. If they haven't, then please have a word with that vendor and see if they can provide extra information. What we found is that publishers and platform providers, they're not all terrible. They may have got terrible scores. What they're terrible at is telling that story. They may have a really fantastically great platform, but if they haven't got a statement that actually explains that and provides that information, then nobody really knows. So it's they're kind of keeping quiet about it, which is a shame if they've done a huge amount of work. So Aspire scores can really kind of tell that story. Now, the Library Accessibility Alliance is, again, a US-based association, but provides a really useful service. What they've done is, I think it's about 88, 90 platforms, and they've gone in and audited them in detail, and then they've provided all of that content for free, downloadable on their website. So you can go in and look at the examples here, like Alexander Street or Art Store, which is part of JSTOR, Bloom 3 Drama Online. They've gone and tested it already, so you can actually go and download that audit and see what problems they experience. And also they include the statements back from the publishers. Publishers often write back to them and say, oh, actually, we're going to change that and update it. So it's a really useful resource. And they've covered a lot of the major ebook platforms and journal platforms. So well worth an explore, and again, a free resource. Others, just to kind of finish off on, LexDisc is definitely worth exploring. This is hosted by University of Southampton. They have a huge amount of free content available, talking about procurement, workflows, talking about how to training, testing processes, really getting into detail, explaining the PS bar regulations. Fantastic resource. You can lose yourself for a couple of hours in there. There's pages after pages of it. I wanted to flag up Alistair McNaught, who I'm sure some of you know. I work closely with Alistair on Aspire. He designed the accessibility maturity model, and there's a lot of resources on his website that you can download for free and take a look at, and lots of videos and talks and things like that. So another great resource talking about all kinds of things. I've listed in there: accessibility statements, planning, prioritizing, all great stuff. So my friends at All Able, now this is Ben Watson, who I'm sure many of you know. He used to be at the University of Kent, but now he's at UCL as their accessibility manager. All Able provide a huge amount of services and resources on their website for accessibility auditing. You can see all these things here, and they work with the universities all the time to make sure that they have accessible content, accessible websites, and just have a really great and knowledgeable team that well worth speaking to. And lastly, I'd like to flag up actually Deep Rose, who is a course designer at the University of Southampton. Now, I've called him an accessibility hurricane here. He really is. He never seems to sleep, which is amazing, but he has a website that just is overflowing with fantastic resources, links, videos, all kinds of things that will help you create a better experience for your users. And he basically looks at anything with accessibility in it. So from every aspect and perspective, well worth an explore of his website. And we've heard from Kellie at JISC today. Definitely worth, if you're not already, definitely worth signing up to become a member of the community group. I think there's over 1,000 people on the site now. And it's one of the things I love about accessibility is that it's a real community sense. It's not competitive. This is even amongst publishers as well. Everyone tries to help each other out. If you've got a question, people are very honest about the things they've done wrong. You can say, oh, we tried that, it was a complete terrible failure, or we did this and it was a success. So there's so much advice and useful links and events that are flagged in the community. It's so worthwhile joining. And again, that's a free one. And JISC have, I think it's monthly free clinics or every 2 months. I can't remember which one. And they're often really great. I know there's one next week, I think, on accessible mathematics, which is a really interesting topic. So if you're not already signed up, I'm sure you are. If you're not, please do join that. And then essentially what we're looking for is to create an accessible ecosystem. I'm working with universities and libraries and publishers, platforms and users, making sure they all work together. So that kind of information kind of supply chain almost, that everyone's talking to each other and nobody's siloed, so that we're creating an experience where publishers are creating fantastic accessible content. Ebook platforms are creating platforms that actually harness that content and provide it to users in a way that's really accessible, and that the library is supported through this, and that there is statements, there are user guides, and that content is fantastic, and if they need accessible files, that we can get hold of them. So it's about trying to create tools and services that really help kind of oil the wheels, as it were, and make sure that everyone gets content in the way they need it. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is the user, and that they have the content that they need at the time that they require it. Because it's no good if a publisher takes 6 weeks to get back to you with an accessible file. That module is probably over, and that impacts the learning outcomes for that user, and it'll probably end up with them dropping out, which is, nobody wants that. So you've got to be focused on the user, but publishers and platforms really have to support the libraries and the universities and colleges as part of that. There's a list of various resources, links, again, all free guides that may be of use. And as I say, I'll share the slides with you afterwards. And my contact details were on Twitter, at least for the foreseeable future until Elon Musk takes over. We have a textBOX and Aspire list, Twitter, and we've also got a website there. So please do drop me a line if you have any questions, or if you have questions now, please shout.
Well, Huw, thank you so much. That was so comprehensive, and I think it's incredible that ecosystem, that sense of community you're creating. It's just been so inspiring. So thank you, and thank you for sharing the slides as well. I think we all really appreciate that because there's so much information to benefit us all. I'm aware that the other group, I think, are finished. So what we'll do is, and Paul, you've made a great comment about statements checking that they're continually updated, of course, when provision changes. But we might all head back into the main room now. We can have a quick discussion about our learning today. We've got an evaluation form for everyone and to say our thank yous. So thanks so much, Huw. We're going to all head back now. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, perfect. Thanks so much. Well, thank you for attending today, everybody. We really, on behalf of the Academic Research and Libraries Group Scotland, we really appreciate everybody coming along to our webinar today. A huge thank you to Kellie for our keynote speech and reminding us how awesome we librarians are. To Adam for showing us as I throw my pen at myself. Adam for showing us about the tools that are, as somebody said, I think it was you, Kirsten, hidden in plain sight, and I'm sure we'll all be having a go at that later on. To Huw for talking to us about our real responsibility in terms of third-party suppliers and procurement, and really sort of making us think about how we ensure that the information about these third parties are being shared with our users, and to Ros for talking about our accessible content, giving us some hints and tips about creating really good accessible content. I'm sure you've got loads of questions and things like that, so please join in with the JISC digital accessibility community. There's absolutely amazing experts there. And join them with the webinars, etc. there. I'm just going to, we're not kind of doing any sort of form of evaluation just now. You will get an email from Kirsten that's got the link, just a short Microsoft form in it. And what it also does is it's, we've kind of got a working title of amazing, what did I say? I wrote it down. Amazing academic libraries for another session towards the end of the year, that the ARLGs are hoping to run. So if you've got any suggestions for themes or topics or sessions that you'd like to run in an amazing academic libraries workshop, and I'd also like you to let us know whether you'd like that to be in person, online, or hybrid as well. So that's in the evaluation form. And also just a huge thank you to Kirsten for facilitating this, because we actually couldn't actually have done any of this without you. So thank you so much, Kirsten. Has anybody got any last questions for our speakers? Any questions, comments, etc.?
I'm just for a comment going to say thank you to you, Jill, because none of this would have happened without you. It's been such an incredible programme. I've learned so much. I know all the delegates have as well, and seems to have gone pretty seamlessly for a lot of content in a very short space of time. So thank you so much to everyone for engaging it. And thanks, special shout out to Joy, who's been manning the ARLG's Twitter throughout. That's been wonderful to see. So thank you, and do share your thoughts. It's ARLG's Access is the hashtag, and we really appreciate everyone doing that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We'll just stay on if anybody's got any questions or comments just now, but if not, you are free to go, and please fill out your evaluation form. We'd really appreciate it. As I said earlier, this is the first event that we've done since before COVID, so we really want to know, what you've liked, what you've not liked, and how you think we can move on in terms of events for the future.